This is a second past life session for Anne Noble. The date is August 5th, 2012. And this is Psychic Medium Cassandra Blizzard. And since I've done a past life session for Anne before, I don't have to explain how it works, so I'm just going to go ahead and start going into the session right away. The very first images I'm seeing is of a woman. She's a very attractive woman. This feels like this is the Middle East because I'm seeing that kind of terrain and that kind of dress, and this is got to be a couple thousand years ago. It's an ancient life. She has a son, and I can see both very, very clearly. The boy has really beautiful skin, dark, wavy to slightly curly hair. It's not really tightly curled. I want to say, I'm kind of bad with age, but I want to say he's about 12 years old. He's very, very close to his mother, and I almost feel like Anne is both mother and son, which is kind of odd, but I focus on the woman quite a bit right now. The fabric of her robe, what she's wearing, is so finely woven and so soft. I can't get over how soft this fabric is. I can literally feel it against my skin, and it's kind of a natural color. I would say, it's not pure white, it's not cream, it's just kind of like probably a natural fiber, but it has these vertical blue stripes in it, just on one side, and the vertical blue stripes are kind of a light to mid-tone blue that is a little bit faded. She has very smooth skin. I mean, both her and the boy, very, very smooth, soft skin, and very smooth, soft hands, which makes me feel like her family is pretty well off. She feels to me like she's about 30 to 32 years old, and her hair, she has very long hair. A little bit lighter than her son's, and it's also wavy, but it feels like silk, and it's like her hair literally is her crowning glory. She takes a lot of pride in her hair. She has these rosy pink lips, which kind of seems like it's in contrast with her skin because she has a light olive toned skin, and her son has a slightly darker olive-toned skin. So they're not real super dark-skinned, and they're not they don't have the skin type of Indians, so they're a little bit lighter than that, but very beautiful skin. And I can actually feel the warmth of the air on my skin. So it must be in a season which is time of year which is not quite as blistering hot, because I feel like wherever they are definitely gets over 100 degrees. So it's kind of like a warmish weather at the moment, but not horribly wilting heat. And the air is dry, and the landscape is kind of dry, rocky strewn, deserty looking, very Middle Eastern looking. I feel like there is a water mass that's not too far off, but it's not within visual distance. So it's not anything seen, it's sort of kind of felt like it's there. She also shows me this clay-formed disc or plate that's got this small hole in the center. It's very flat. It doesn't have any raised edges. It's very flat, and there's figs on this plate, this clay plate, and I don't know if they use this plate to kind of set the figs in the sun and dry them. That's what I'm assuming it's for. That's the feeling I get, is that they put the figs on this flat clay disc and it dries them. She also shows me this oil that's in this jar, this clay jar. But I really am trying to figure out, I'm not sure this is a clay jar. I don't know if they did any glass blowing back then, but it almost seems like it's glass. And there's an oil in this, and there's some little like leaves or herbs in this oil, and there's olives in the oil. And whatever this oil is, I'm not sure if it's olive oil or not, but the olives are definitely in there with the herbs. And there's a couple of different kinds of this oil, one with olives, one with just herbs. But I have the impression that this oil is not easy to come by, or it's very difficult to make. I feel like I'm getting a lot of detail on this life. I mean, even down to her hands and her fingernails, because she has very beautiful hands, very soft, delicate hands. And I feel like I'm getting a lot of detail because I feel like this is a very important life to your soul as far as the feeling that I get around it. It was a really, I don't know how to describe it. It was a very beautiful life. I mean, this woman is a very, very balanced, I mean, spiritually and emotionally balanced woman. She's not in a position of power. She's a mother. She's a wife. I don't see her husband right now, but there's definitely a husband. She's a sister. She's a daughter, but she's not in a powerful position, but she's so balanced at the core. I know that they have a religion that they practice, but she doesn't feel to me like she's really deeply connected to that religion. She's basically just living her life extremely happy with who she is and where she is. She pulls me out a distance, like she's taking me out of that region and pulling me into this other region. It's like she's showing me that some distance away from the land where they live, there's some political upheaval and political upset. Like there's this powerful man that's makes people a little bit nervous. So not sure what role he plays. Don't know if this is Greece that she's pulling me to. I'm not real sure, but it's some distance away, and it's this highly political figure or leader that makes the people in her region nervous. So there's concern. There's political concern, but basically that area, they're a very happy, balanced people. She also shows me a donkey. I feel like she owns this donkey, or the family, her husband owns this donkey, but there's another small hoofed animal. I'm not sure what this is. It almost kind of reminds me of a alpaca or something, but I'm not even sure if alpacas were in that region, but I'm not real sure what this little animal is, but they were definitely around this little hoofed animal. And I feel like they used that animal, it's not a sheep, they used that animal for the wool and milk, is what I feel like. There's two variations of this community, because there's these tents that are made of a really, really sturdy hide of some kind, so very strong, and these wooden poles. And there's also these structures that are some kind of stone or clay, some kind of brick, something that's very simple, kind of primitive. So there's kind of a mix of the tents and these other structures. She makes me feel like there's almost like a temple to go to. And I want to say this has to be Jewish. I could be wrong, but it feels Jewish. There's like a temple, but it's really, the community is pretty small, so it's not like this huge big building. It's just more like just a place they go. And she takes this water in this clay pot. And I don't know if they're using it to wash their hands and feet. That's the feeling I get. It's like they use it to wash their hands and feet before they go into this. And this is kind of a situation where they give offerings, because I see them putting some kind of plant. I don't know what this is. It's like a little branch. I'm not sure what it is, whether it's an herb or something like that. Not a real thick branch. It's not like they're putting tree branches, but it's small. But it's a bundle that she places on this kind of slab thing. But she makes me feel like this is mostly men. Mostly men. The women are doing within the temple something else. It's like there's two sections of this temple thing. And it's very loosely, kind of a loosely based thing. It's not like, it doesn't feel like what we're used to being taught about ancient religions or anything. It's really, there's no feeling of being hurried, no feeling of being rushed, no feeling of having to do something at a particular time. It's just such a loose kind of free community. It's a really interesting life. To me, the feeling I get is just so carefree, other than this far-off political issue that's a concern. Now, this woman is very, very loved by her husband, and she is very much in love with her husband, and they have a very committed relationship. It feels like he travels for something, or at this point that I'm seeing this life, he's somewhere else. So I feel like he does some traveling. I also feel like there's another, I don't want to say clan, because I'm not sure that's how they describe themselves, but there's another band of people that's some distance away, a couple of days journey. And I feel like this, her husband has a brother that's maybe in this other community of people. But there's something he does. I'm not real sure what it is, because she's not revealing that to me. But it's got to be a business of some kind. But as I said, they're not poor. The community is not a very rich community, but they don't lack for anything. And it doesn't seem like she does a lot of work, because her hands are so soft. And when I say this man really loves her, I mean, when he comes home, he wants to hold her and just look at her, and they've been together for a long time, but yet he really, really loves this woman. And they're very happy together. They're both very happy, very healthy. Her husband's a good-looking man. The boy, their son, is very, very quiet. It's like he just observes. He doesn't talk a lot. He just observes. And he is also an extremely balanced person. But I feel like as he gets older, he becomes more politically involved. He feels like he doesn't want anything to do with the priesthood or being a rabbi or anything like that, but he becomes more politically involved as far as, I don't think he becomes a political leader, but he seems more like what I would call a rabble-rouser, where he's opposing the politics of this distant land that's going to influence his region. and he kind of semi-opposes the religion. Very intelligent, devoted to his mother, devoted to his family. But as this boy of 12, he's very, very quiet, and he's just like an observer of life. He's just soaking it all up and taking it all in and formulating all these ideas about what life should be and politics and all this. I want to keep saying the name John regarding this boy. I don't know if that is him or someone else, but he makes me keep wanting to say the name John. He ends up later in life. Actually, he starts pretty early, like at around the age of 15, where I feel like he's starting to go to different bands and regions with his father, but he ends up traveling a lot. He goes to a lot of places because he shows me the seashore. He shows me all these places, and he becomes very known because there's people that just everywhere he goes, they greet him. I also feel like there's texts that are written about him, and he's very much loved. He's very, very loved and very respected. And how does he put this to me? He's welcome at many tables to eat. That's how he kind of puts it to me. So people just love to see him. They want to feed him. He's welcome in their home. So he does a lot of traveling and a lot of people around him. He also spends time with his mother's sister, his aunt, and they have a very close relationship as well. I feel like a little bit later in life, which I really see him fairly young, a little bit later in life, he pulls me down to his abdomen and his stomach, so I feel like he has some stomach issues later on. When he grows into adulthood, he's got some stomach issues. So it's like he's careful what he eats. It's like his system is sensitive and he's got kind of a delicate balance. I also keep wanting to say a name. I think it sounds like Jared, but I could be a little bit wrong about the pronunciation of that name. I'm kind of fading out of that life. I was hoping to get a little bit more about exactly who this woman and this boy is, but I'm being pulled out of that life and into another really interesting life. This is a woman, and I'm not sure what the time frame in this is, but it goes way back, and it's in, I feel like it's got to be like in England or Scotland somewhere because of the terrain that I'm seeing. And she's an older woman at this point. I almost want to say the word hag, but it's not that she's haggish, but she's got this wild, crazy hair. She doesn't do anything with her hair. Her hair is kind of white gray, and it's kind of wiry is the only way I can put it. She's a small woman. She's thin. She's petite. She has kind of sharp features, her face, and she has light-colored eyes. I want to say they're green, but kind of sharp features. The interesting thing about her is even though she's older, she's got all of her teeth and they're in really good condition, and she has kind of, I don't know, she just looks like a crone. Not super wrinkled, but she just comes off as being kind of a crone. And she's essentially an herbalist. She's like a healer, but she she has all these spiritual practices. She's probably what we today would assume to be a witch, but if you were to ask her, she would shun that. No, I'm not a witch. So she's a healer, and she's very spiritual, and she performs these rituals, and it's not anything like dire, like dark or blood sacrifice. It's all very like good witch kind of stuff, but her appearance would be kind of off-putting to people. Not so much, she's not ugly, but she's older, not so much that, but she just lets her hair grow wild, and it's long, and she's wearing this long, dark green, like almost a faded forest green gown, and I see her in this structure. It's a stone structure, and I'd probably call it a fortress more so than a castle, because it's kind of squarish. It's not this like princess kind of castle-y look. It's kind of this rudimentary squarish thing. And I'm not sure, I don't think this is her property. I feel like she's living in this room, or has this room. Actually, it seems like it's two rooms, because there's she's got a sleeping area that's somewhere away from this other room, and it's almost like she's just got this little apothecary in that room, in that section, so it's almost like she's under the dispensation, or she's allowed to stay there, but she's not family, and it's not her property. It's kind of an interesting situation. I feel like she also has a son, and it's interesting because the son has a little bit different coloring than her. He has darker hair. He's rather tall and thin, and I feel like he's doing pretty well for himself. I'm not quite sure what role he plays in life, but he does really well for himself, and he comes and visits her, but he does not live at that particular place. He lives somewhere else. And he has this amazing horse with all this, I don't even know how to describe what's on this horse. It's kind of like this cloth, particular kind of bridle, particular kind of saddle with this cloth over it, that's draped over the rump of the horse. And so I feel like he has money. He's important in some way. I mean, not like he's a king or anything, but he's important in some way. So it's a really odd contrast to me, because she's this herbalist and healer that kind of resembles a witchy crone, and he's this important figure that's doing well for himself. And when I say important, he's not like widely known. He's just known in that particular area, but it's not like he's a king or a prince or anything like that. But he's definitely very financially secure. Now, the woman, to me, she feels like she's gone through hardship. I'm not even sure that she was ever married to her son's father. It's almost like he's a bastard child, because she doesn't pull me to ever having been married. It's almost like she's been this herbalist from the time she was really young. She pulls me to the age of 16, where she shows me that she was learning about herbs and the medicine of that time under this other woman, and it may have been her mother. It feels to me like it's her mother. And then at the age of 20, she's very beautiful. At the age of 20, she's this very almost revered personality, in that, she does heal people, and she is the known kind of herbal healer, shaman of that region at the time. And then she has, by the time she's around 30, she makes me feel like she has some hardship in her life, that a lot of difficulty. I feel like she went through a period where I'm not too sure that people didn't beat her and run her out of town and stone her and try to kill her, because she shows me this really horrible time of hardship, and then she forwards me to being this older woman living in this fortress under the care, or actually she's caring for whoever owns this fortress and the people in that region. So she did have some difficulty, but she kind of is in a zone in her life where she kind of likes almost the stigma or the people having a fearful kind of respect. So she doesn't care if people think she's crazy. She doesn't care what anybody thinks. She just does her thing, and she'll go about her little room there where she's got all these herbs and she's got these tinctures and she's got these oils, and she just kind of talks to herself, or it's almost like there's a guide or a spirit or somebody with her. So it's like she's talking to herself, but she's talking to this imaginary person, and she doesn't care. She really doesn't care, and she almost kind of feeds into people's little bit of fear of her. So she's a really interesting personality, very strong, she's a kind of a unique perspective on what she went through. It's like she doesn't hate people because of it. She's got a little bit of bitterness, but overall, she's going to be who she is, period, and she's not going to stop being a healer. But she does have that interesting spiritual side to her where she knows there's spirits around, she talks to the spirits around, and she knows there's more to herself than just the physical body. So she has a definite higher awareness that just doesn't quite present itself the same way as some other regions would. She's an interesting character. I like her. She keeps saying the word region, but I'm not real sure if she's saying region or regent. But it's a beautiful European land. I mean, it's got to be England or Scotland somewhere, because that's what it looks like to me. Very cold in the winter. She's saying Scottish, so she's correcting me. I believe this would be Scotland then. And she's telling me that the reason she went through that hardship was people's fear. People's fear of her and not understanding what she was doing. They thought she was a devil, or there was a devil in her. So she kind of keeps it in perspective of their infancy, is what she calls it. They just have a moronic view of spirituality and kind of fearful of anything spiritual. So whatever that region that she was in at the time, that's not the same region where she is now, and she's showing me herself at this particular age. So it's a little bit further away. She was actually, I feel like she was rescued by this person, this man, from that situation, and where he just took her with him, and that's how she ended up being where she is now, where she's showing me now. She also shows me this. I'm not sure what this is, and I'm not sure how to describe it. I don't know what to call it. It's a metal thing. It's round and it's kind of flat, and it's not a coin. It almost kind of reminds me of something that would be given by another person, almost to show that she's under the care of this man in authority. It's metal. It's a metal round thing that's kind of shaped like a coin, but it's bigger than a coin, and it has bar in the middle, so it's almost like a wheel with a bar in the middle, and it looks to me like it would go, like a scarf would run through it, and it would kind of hold the ends of a scarf together. I don't know any other way to describe this. But there's like an insignia or symbol of some kind on it that kind of stamps it as belonging to this man that owns the fortress, or I don't know if it's the man that owns the fortress or the man that rescued her years before from this situation. But she does show me this little item, this metal item, that I'm not sure what it is, but apparently it's meaningful to her and meaningful to that life because of what it represents. She says there's kindness in the world and kind people, and that it's important not to let difficult times cause one to be bitter so that they don't live their life. And I think that's what this thing means to her. So it must have come from the man that rescued her from being killed by these people. She considered herself to be a legitimate healer. She has a track record of healing, and she really knows herbs, and she knows the body as much as she could at the time. But she said there were other people back during the time when she was almost killed that were like what we would call like snake oil salesmen. They were not legitimate, and they were hurting people and accidentally killing people by giving them the wrong medicines, apparently, or the medicines just didn't work, so the people died. She said she's showing me this one man in particular that was real slimy kind of a guy, and this young girl died under his care, and it kind of sparked this outrage and this issue in this region where the people just kind of like got together with whatever they could grab and routed the herbalists out. But she makes me feel like there weren't many healers in that area. There were very, very few. And this guy was not even from her region. He was from somewhere else. It was like a passing through. I'm being pulled into another life. And all I'm seeing right now is this really big, burly kind of guy, not fat, I don't mean fat, really muscular, really big. This guy's got to be 6'4", big muscles, broad shoulders, big hands, and he's chained to a stone wall, shackled to a stone wall in like a basement or a dungeon of Castle Keep is the word that comes to me. Not sure if I'm using that properly. Some kind of stone fortress. And he's dirty. Whatever he's shackled there for, he's telling me that he's innocent. But his situation is pretty dire because I feel like they're going to put him to death. I feel like this lifetime for you, Anne, is pretty significant in the emotional impact of this. This man grew up kind of poor, and there were times when he was a boy, like when he was 13, 14 years old, he had to steal bread just to exist. And he did all kind of different little things to try to earn food, basically food and a place to sleep. He has a mother, he has a father when he was younger, but the situation was pretty dire. And he shows me this wooden cart with all this hay on it, and he shows me him putting piling the hay into the cart and like taking care of horses, and I want to say there's a mule too that he's showing me in these really rudimentary stalls, and keeping the stalls clean and doing things like that. So when he was younger, he was definitely having to try to find a way to survive. And he said that there was this stew that he would eat, this woman would make for him with bread, and the bread was really good, the stew was really good, and he was always just so grateful when he could have this stew, and it was like eating heaven, he says, because he'd be so hungry, and the stew would just be so delicious. So he was always really grateful for that. And he says there were times when he had to eat raw eggs that he had to steal, and he would eat them shell and all because he was so hungry. He would also, as he got a little bit older, trap rabbits and eat rabbits, but it was a really rudimentary trap. They showed me this string. I mean, it was really rudimentary the way he would nab these rabbits, and it was really hard to catch them, so he didn't have rabbit very often. But times were really hard. I mean, all the way up to the point where he was about 19, things were really hard. And then as he passed into manhood, his life was stressful because he wasn't sure what to do to make a future for himself, and his father and mother were always like very poor, and he didn't want to be that. And I feel like he had a brother that was really like 10 years younger than him, a very big, huge age gap. But he kind of left the family aside and went on about his own way. Not that he didn't care about them, but he just had to survive, so he had to move on. He ended up, I'm not quite sure what he's showing me that he ended up doing for survival, but he has what I think is an ox, and he's got this wagon, and I don't know whether he's like, people pay him to transport goods or what exactly it is, but he's on this wagon traveling down this dirt road, like this two-rut road, and going fairly long distances. So it almost feels like he's transporting things for people. And he says that at the time there were like highwaymen or something to that effect, where the roads could be dangerous, and doing what he was doing, it could be dangerous. He shows me also himself going to a city, and I want to say this is London or a city like it. It feels like it's kind of London, but it could be wrong. It might be another city in England that's like London, but very populated. But he says the city is like really dirty, and it was much nicer living in the country, in the region, because the city is so dirty, and he's saying it smells really bad, and the streets are dirty, and I'm not real sure where exactly this is, but more people, more densely populated, and it's like he started working I want to say for a baron. I think he's saying baron. He started working for this man. And he was just kind of like, he did whatever he was asked to do. He lived, I want to say, in the stable. There's this like little loft. You couldn't even call it a room. It's just a little loft over this stable. And I feel like he did drive this guy a little bit, because I'm seeing a horse and a buggy. And he's not real clear on what he does, but apparently he was still just kind of eking out a living. He shows me these coins. So he made some money somehow, a little bit of money that he was just like desperately hiding and keeping aside because he wanted to buy some property of his own. And I feel like he wanted to farm or something. He just wanted to buy a property of his own. And he would do just about anything for money. But he was accused of stealing by the guy that he worked for. And he was also accused of raping this young woman, which he did not do. And he was, I believe that's why he was shackled. He also keeps saying the word sparrow. I don't know why he's saying sparrow. I don't know if, like, there's a sparrow around him or he likes sparrow or that's some kind of code word for something. But he says in the city, like, that's where all his problems began. There were things going on. I don't know how to describe it, but there was definitely some shady characters that you had to be careful of. And he knew, I feel like he knew who actually raped the girl. Meaning not knew him like he was a friend, but knew who it was that raped the girl. And he tells me that he never got out of that dungeon alive. I feel like he starved to death. And it was horrible. And he said there were rats that would bite him, literally eating him while he was chained to the wall. He said it was horrible, absolutely horrible. And he was innocent, and his life was just difficult from birth to death. And it was a really horrible, sad ending. I feel like his name was Joseph because he keeps saying the name Joseph. And the man that he worked for was, I want to say at the time that he went to work for him, the guy was like in his early 30s, and then he must have worked for him for a while because he shows me the guy is like 35 at the time. I feel like he's 35 at the time he's put in this dungeon, the guy that he worked for. And I want to say his name is Stanton because he keeps saying Stanton. And I don't know if that's his last name or his first name. And I swear it almost feels to me like Ian is the guy in the dungeon and the guy that he worked for. This is also, the guy in the dungeon has brown hair. The guy that he worked for has dark brown hair that's kind of wavy and it's kind of longish. It's like to the shoulders almost. And he, very well dressed, wealthy guy, not egregiously wealthy, but wealthy enough. And there's a dark side to him. There's just something about him that's not quite likable to me. And I think he's the one that raped the girl, because that's what you in the dungeon is telling me. It's like the Stanton guy is the one who raped the girl. You've got this scenario of multiple lives coming together by locating in an interesting way, or it's like you're playing two roles at the same time in different lifetimes. Now, the girl in this scenario, her father, she became pregnant from this, and her father was very, very hard on her for this and actually blamed her for this. So she didn't have an easy role in this either. She thought about suicide quite a bit in this situation, but she decided not to. Not easy. She finally was married. This man married her, and actually it ended up being a very good marriage for her because the man really did love her. And really the man was rescuing her from this situation because the father was beating her and everything because he blamed her for this. And the father considered her to be a liability, and then after that and being pregnant, she was even more of a liability. She ended up having a son. Now the guy Stanton, I'm not too sure about him. I feel like he had a brother, and I feel like, I don't know if he hanged himself or what, but he was a very depressed personality. He was a very unhappy soul. And I'm getting pulled now into another life. And I think this is an Indian man, East Indian man. I want to say he's like 45 or 50 at the time that you're being shown this life in. And he's very, very thin, and he's going through some kind of spiritual ritual where I feel like he's shunning food, and people will bring him, I'm not sure what this is. I don't know if it's rice or some other kind of a grain, and tiny, tiny, tiny bits. And sometimes he won't even eat it. Other times he might eat tiny bits of it. But women will bring him these little bowls or plates, tiny, tiny portions, and there's also a little green leaf. It's an herb of some kind that's pretty much used as medicine to get him through this ritual. And he's looking for some kind of enlightenment, and he's making a reference to a snake, and I'm wondering if he's referring to some kind of kundalini. That's how I would interpret it. But then again, it could be a literal snake. I don't know, because he's not being real specific. He's got some kind of paint symbol on his face that's like a temporary thing that's just painted on with like a stick or a finger or something that's drawn in red. And I think that is symbolic of this. It must be symbolic of either who he is or this ritual. He's also showing me elephants, though. I have no idea how that factors in. He might be just trying to show me what region he's in or where he's at, because the elephants might be symbolic of what area of the world he's in. He says these elephants are small. They're not like big African elephants. So I'm not sure where he is. But he's Indian. He almost feels to me like his spiritual pursuits are not satisfying enough to him. He's not achieving what he wants to achieve. And it's almost like he gets to the point where he says, like he's going down the wrong path, and he realizes the enlightenment that he wants is not going to happen the way he's going about it. So he ends this practice of shunning food, and he pretty much just goes back to living his life. He's got a wife. I feel like he has a son at least. I see a son. He probably has more than one son. And he's not poor. He's got a house, but, and he just kind of goes back to living and his life and being happy with living his life and being happy with his wife. He tells me he also has a daughter. So he's happy with his life, and he realizes that those attempts at enlightenment with those severe rituals are not the way to go, and that you can be spiritual right where you are. And he becomes a very balanced, happy man and lives out his life at peace within himself. And in the realization that he was spiritual all along, and he didn't have to go through all of that to be in touch with his soul. He tells me that he still eats the one little herb thing that is like used as medicine. He still eats that, but with food. He says real food. And he has a very pleasant life. He's not lacking in anything. He has a very, very pleasant life. And he feels to me like he died at a pretty old age and very happy, very, very much at peace within himself. And he feels very kind of like mystical guru to me because he's sage. He's very sage in what he's saying of people needing to find their balance within and maintain that balance within, and that it doesn't require starvation or long prayer or crazy, wild, long pursuits of meditation that's for hours and hours. It's just, he's saying it's all within. And the balance is inside all of us. I kind of paused the tape and waited for quite a while to see if I'd get pulled any other lives, and since these were very, very long, I'm going to end the session here because I'm not getting immediately pulled to another life. So I'm going to go ahead and end the session here.